The lights in Barracks C never truly went dark, even at 02's, Eero hours, when the base was supposed to be silent. The fluorescent bulbs hummed like insects trapped in glass. Rows of bunks stood in perfect alignment, boots squared beneath them, duffel bags zipped and locked with ritual precision. This was where recruits learned discipline, not through words, but through pressure, through fear. She stood at attention at the foot of her bunk, shoulders squared, chin level, eyes forward. Recruit Hale had learned quickly that silence was her greatest armor. She was not the loudest, she was not the strongest, but she was unbreakable in a way that didn't announce itself. No trembling hands, no darting eyes, just stillness, the kind that unsettled people who were used to control. That was why drill instructor Mercer hated her. His boots struck the floor as he paced the aisle, each step sharp, deliberate, echoing off the concrete walls. Mercer was a veteran of the old school, thick neck, scar along his jaw, voice like gravel dragged across steel. He believed fear was the purest teacher, and tonight he was looking for a lesson to teach. "You think you're special, Hale?" Mercer barked, stopping inches from her face. She didn't answer. Recruits weren't supposed to, unless spoken to directly with a question that demanded response. She kept her gaze fixed forward, breathing slow, controlled. Mercer leaned closer, too close. "I asked you a question." "Yes, sir," she said evenly, that calm, measured, unshaken, lit something ugly behind his eyes. The other recruits watched from their bunks, bodies rigid, pretending not to see while seeing everything. Everyone knew Mercer's temper. Everyone knew when he focused on one person, the night was about to get long. He circled her like a predator, boots scraping. "You don't flinch, you don't crack, you don't beg." He stopped behind her. "You think that makes you dangerous?" Her jaw tightened, still silent. Mercer stepped into her space again, his voice dropping low enough that only those closest could hear. "Girls like you don't belong here." The words were poison, carefully chosen. "You think because you can shoot straight and run fast, you're one of them." He jabbed a finger toward the wall, where a faded emblem marked the legacy of those who had passed through this place before. "They'll eat you alive." She felt the heat of his breath, the weight of his presence pressing against her back. This was no longer instruction. This was intimidation, and it crossed a line. Mercer suddenly grabbed the front of her uniform, yanking her forward hard enough that her boots scraped the floor. A collective inhale rippled through the barracks. "I said, answer me." For the first time, her eyes shifted. Not in fear, in warning. "I am here to serve, sir," she said. The restraint in her voice only enraged him further. Mercer laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "You know what they say about you, Hale." He tightened his grip. "That you're quiet because you're dangerous." He leaned in, voice a hiss. "She could kill you." He mocked, loud enough now for everyone to hear. "That's what they whisper, right?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. Her fists clenched at her sides, knuckles whitening. Every instinct screamed to react. Years of training before this place. Discipline learned the hard way. Fought against muscle memory honed for violence. She did nothing. That restraint was the real threat. Mercer shoved her back hard. She stumbled but caught herself, snapping back to attention in one smooth motion. Perfect form, perfect control. The barracks was silent now. No coughing, no shifting. Even Mercer seemed to pause, something flickering across his face. Uncertainty, perhaps. He recovered quickly. "You think your silence protects you." He sneered. "Out there, it'll get you killed." He turned away, pacing again, shouting orders to no one in particular, his anger spilling over the room. But the moment had already passed. Something irreversible had happened, because unseen by Mercer, a small red light blinked steadily above the far doorway. The night duty officer's camera had captured everything, and somewhere beyond the barracks, far above the level of a drill instructor's authority, 4 men who did not tolerate abuse, weakness, or ego disguised as discipline were about to hear a name they would not forget. Recruit Hale returned to her bunk when ordered, lying flat on her back, staring at the ceiling. Her heart was steady. She had endured worse, but this time she knew the silence was about to break, not in temperature, but in intent. Drill Instructor Mercer sat alone at the steel table, hands flat, fingers spread as if anchoring himself to reality. The walls were bare concrete, painted a dull gray that swallowed sound, no insignia. No rank markers, just a single American flag behind the far wall, motionless. He had been ordered here at 0600. No explanation, no chance to prepare a defense. That alone should have terrified him. The door opened without ceremony. 4 men entered. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't rush. Their presence shifted the air, heavy and unmistakable. Each wore a Navy service uniform, immaculate, pressed so sharply it looked sculpted. The insignia on their collars carried weight. Decades of command, of decisions made where hesitation cost lives. Colonels, 4 of them. Mercer swallowed. He stood instinctively, snapping to attention. "Sir," none of them returned the greeting. They sat. Only then did one of them speak, a silver-haired officer with eyes that had seen too much ocean and too many wars. "Sit." Mercer obeyed. The colonel slid a tablet across the table. The screen was paused on a familiar image. Barracks C, fluorescent lights. A female recruit standing at attention. Mercer's stomach tightened. "You know why you're here," the colonel said calmly. Mercer hesitated. "Sir, if this is about corrective discipline, stop." Another colonel cut in. His voice was quiet, almost conversational. "Discipline does not involve hands on a recruit." Mercer opened his mouth, closed it. The tablet screen moved, video footage played. Mercer watched himself pace, shout, lean too close, grab fabric that was never supposed to be touched. The sound was muted, but the body language said everything. No context, no excuses, just truth. The 3rd colonel leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the table. "Do you know who that recruit is?" Mercer nodded stiffly. "Recruit Hale, sir." "No," the 4th colonel said. "Younger than the others, eyes sharp as glass. Do you know what she was before she stood on that floor?" Mercer frowned. "Sir." The colonel tapped a folder and slid it open. Inside were documents Mercer had never seen. Training records from places that didn't exist on official maps. Medical clearances signed by names that carried weight in classified corridors. Psychological evaluations stamped exceptional restraint under extreme stress. Mercer's breath caught. She didn't come here to prove herself. The 1st colonel said she came here already proven. Mercer felt sweat bead at his temples. The 2nd colonel spoke again. "You said something during that encounter." Mercer stiffened. "Sir, I don't recall," you said. The colonel interrupted. "She could kill you." The room went silent. Mercer forced a laugh that died instantly. "Sir, that was sarcasm, morale control. Recruits exaggerate." "Wrong answer," the 3rd colonel said flatly. He stood and walked behind Mercer's chair, not threatening, just present. "You weren't wrong," the colonel continued. "She could kill you quickly, efficiently, and then render aid to the man standing next to you." Mercer's hands trembled. "But she didn't," the 1st colonel said. "Know why?" Mercer swallowed hard. "Discipline, sir. Character," the 4th colonel corrected. "Something you lack." The tablet shut off. The 1st colonel folded his hands. "You crossed the line between training and abuse. You used fear to satisfy ego, not to build soldiers." Mercer leaned forward desperately. "Sir, I've served 23 years, combat tours, commendations. I've broken recruits down to build them back stronger. You broke trust." The colonel replied, "And trust is the spine of this institution." The second colonel slid a document across the table. Mercer recognized the heading instantly. Immediate relief of duty. His mouth went dry. "You're done training recruits," the third colonel said. "Effective now." Mercer's voice cracked. "Sir, please, I can adjust. I can. You already did enough adjusting." The fourth colonel said, "We don't need instructors who forget that silence can be strength." A pause. Then the first colonel stood. "This meeting lasted 7 minutes," he said. "That's all it took." The door opened behind them. Military police waited. Mercer remained seated, staring at the paper in front of him. 7 minutes, that was all his authority had been worth. As he was escorted out, none of the colonels looked back. Far away, back in Barracks C, Recruit Hale ran morning drills with the others, face unreadable, breath steady. She had never raised her voice. She never needed to. The sun was barely above the horizon when the base began to feel different. Orders moved faster. Voices were quieter. Even the wind off the water seemed to carry a warning. Word traveled the way it always did in military installations, not through announcements, but through absence. Drill Instructor Mercer did not appear for morning formation. At 0730 hours, recruits stood in perfect lines on the parade ground, boots planted, eyes forward. Another instructor called cadence, his tone firm but professional. No shouting for sport, no humiliation disguised as discipline. Recruit Hale noticed immediately. She always noticed what others missed. The drills went on as scheduled. Push-ups, sprints, weapon handling. The routine never bent for individuals, and she expected no exception. Whatever had happened beyond the barracks walls was not her concern. She had learned long ago that survival often meant focusing on the next breath, the next step. Still, something had shifted. By mid-morning, a black government sedan rolled past the training field, slow and deliberate. The windows were tinted, the kind that didn't invite curiosity. Hale caught only a reflection of the American flag in the glass before it disappeared toward the administrative wing. Inside that wing, Mercer's world collapsed. He stood in a narrow office with no windows, flanked by 2 military police officers. His uniform had been stripped of its insignia. The fabric looked the same, but without rank. It felt like a costume. A final document lay on the desk, dishonorable relief from instructor duty, pending separation review, immediate escort off training grounds. Mercer stared at the words, unable to reconcile them with the man he believed himself to be. 23 years of service, reduced to ink and signatures. "Sir," he said hoarsely, looking at the officer behind the desk, "I trained soldiers. I made them stronger." The officer didn't raise his voice. "You mistook fear for strength." Mercer clenched his jaw. She didn't complain. That recruit. She didn't say a word. "That," the officer replied, "is what saved her and condemned you." The pen was placed in Mercer's hand. "Sign." His hand shook as he did. Minutes later, he was escorted down the corridor he had once ruled. Doors closed as he passed, not out of ceremony but disinterest. Authority evaporated quickly when it was no longer recognized. Outside, the wind was sharp. Mercer was led past recruits who did not look at him. Hale was among them, moving between stations with focused precision. Their eyes did not meet. She felt his presence the way one feels a storm passing. Not personal, just something moving away. He was guided into the sedan, the door closed, and just like that, he was gone. No speech, no confrontation, no dramatic reckoning. His career had ended in minutes. That evening, the recruits were called into formation. A senior officer stood before them, posture relaxed but commanding. No threats, no raised voice, just clarity. "Discipline," he said, "is not cruelty. Strength is not volume, and leadership is not fear." His eyes scanned the formation, stopping briefly on Hale. Not in recognition, but in acknowledgement. Any instructor who forgets this, he continued, will answer for it. Dismissed. As the recruits dispersed, whispers began careful, restrained. Stories reshaped themselves as they moved from mouth to mouth. 4 colonels, video footage, immediate removal. Some looked at Hale differently now, not with resentment, with something closer to respect. She ignored it. That night, she sat on her bunk, cleaning her gear with meticulous care. Each movement deliberate, each breath steady. Control was not something she turned on. It was who she was. A fellow recruit finally broke the silence. Was it hard? The girl asked quietly from the neighboring bunk. Hale didn't look up. Was what hard? Not fighting back. Hale paused, just for a second. Fighting back is easy, she said. Stopping yourself isn't. The barracks fell quiet again. Weeks later, Hale stood on the range, rifle braced, eyes locked downrange. Wind speed calculated, distance measured, breath controlled, fire when ready. The instructor said she fired, perfect shot, no reaction, no celebration, just results. Somewhere far from the base, Mercer packed his remaining belongings into cardboard boxes, the echoes of his own voice haunting him more than any punishment ever could. And somewhere between those two paths lay the lesson the institution had quietly enforced. True power doesn't shout. True strength doesn't threaten, and the most dangerous people in the room are often the ones who never raise their voice at all.